Executive committee to order. Our first item is a vote to approve the agenda. By Urban Dale, second by Waukee. Discussion on the agenda. None, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Agenda is approved. Up next, we have January meeting minutes that require motion. So moved. By Oklahoma City, second by Waukee. Any comments on the meeting minutes from January? If none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. January meeting minutes are approved. Up next, we're gonna have done a report on the amended calendar year 2026 meeting dates.
Quick housekeeping item for you. When we adopted our calendar of meetings in November, we were operating on the assumption that the annual DC trip is going to be happening the first week of May. It has since been rescheduled to the first week of June, and so we're proposing to adjust our schedule accordingly so that the May meeting would move to its usual slot first week of the month. Excuse me. The June meeting would then move back and week to June 11th. So we just want your approval on this before we update our calendars. Before you approve.
Okay. All right, moved by Waukee, and I didn't catch second. Urbandale. All right, we're discussing. Okay. Any discussion on this? If not, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Both same sign. All right, calendar is been. Thanks. Report discuss. Pre-plan update.
Yes. Thank you. Good morning, all. Brief update on where we've been recently with our pre-planning efforts and what's to come. There we are. Okay. So last year, one of the big pushes for the freight plan update was to send out 2 surveys, one to industry stakeholders, one to communities, to identify trends in freight that they're seeing, impediments to freight movement, whether that be aviation, truck, rail, in Greater Des Moines area. And so results from that survey, which is still live and we're still hoping to receive more feedback on, will inform our trends chapter and impediments map, which you can see in the back on your way out, or some point later today. We've had tech members identify impediments to freight in their communities, and if there are any that you know of, this is still an ongoing activity to receive more information on that. We've been drafting the existing conditions chapter of our freight plan, and one really exciting thing that Janet has been working on that I believe is on that map, which is moved to the ground back there, is a heavy truck high injury network analysis. It's a similar methodology to what was done in the CSAP for identifying critical impediments to safety when it comes to freight movement in the metro. So take a look at that, and if you have any comments or thoughts on that, it'll help inform the safety chapter, which is, I'll talk about it in just a moment here. Okay. I know what's on the next slide. What is try now? Bada bing, there's that map as well. Hard to see up there, but if you want to get a closer look, there at the back of the room as well. So next steps for the freight plan include convening a steering committee, and we'll be having a few focus groups throughout the metro. Hoping to have one at the airport with Ruan, and I believe with the intermodal freight facility as well. We'll be finishing up that trend chapter and engaging also the Freight Advisory Council at the DOT in March to help inform a bit of that as well. And then we'll begin drafting that safety chapter, starting with the analysis that's been done. Happy to answer any questions this time. Otherwise, let's report.
Thanks, Father Brett. Slew transportation.
So FPO has been approached by a couple of our member jurisdictions to help coordinate a corridor study up in the northwest portion of the planning area. So for the last couple of years, Polk County Conservation has worked hard to acquire the Brenton Slough, and they have, actually the whole region has a trail gap through that area, and there is hope that the trail would connect from Johnson, Jester, Granger, Slough, Grimes, which I'll show you a better map if you don't have to watch my hands. But just some of so the RFP has not been issued yet, but I did want to bring a couple of the priorities to you. The ecological integrity and preservation. So a slough is actually where a creek slows down, spreads out for a little while, and then it'll come back and start flowing. So it is a unique feature to our ecosystem around here. And so Polk County Conservation has made it kind of their mission to improve access to that recreation, that space. There's also corridor connectivity and safety pieces, as well as how are we going to fund this? How would we fund actually moving into, and I don't know how to spell, progression is what that's supposed to say, Swift something, to actually have it designed and built shortly thereafter this study. So if you're not familiar with this loom, so this is Chester, Fraser, Johnson, Grimes, and the slope is right in the middle there. It does straddle both Polk County and Dallas County lines. Dallas County has allowed Polk County to manage that land, things like that. So the NPO has sat in the middle and helped put together the RFP, and there is a tentative timeline for its release. We'll be bringing this topic back to our policy committee on the 19th this month as well. If things go well there, then it would get released on February 20th by our website. Proposals will be due back to me here on the NPO staff in mid-March, and then April, May, we would review, interview, and select. Bring that back for approval from the policy committee as well, with hopes of beginning work this summer. Just as I mentioned, Grimes, Polk County Conservation, Granger, Johnson, SERPTA, and the MPO have been sitting on this discussion together. And it is likely that those, at least the first three, Grimes, Polk County Conservation, and Granger, would be the funders of this RFP and of this selection. And so as part of our policies and procedures, I did at least want to bring a tentative selection committee before for you all to consider. That would be the people from those jurisdictions. So Jake Anderson, Alex from Grimes, Polk County Conservation would be Rich Leopold and Adam Fendrick, and then Kirk Borland from Granger, who's their city manager, likely to be the selection committee. And again, the MPO assisting and collecting all that stuff, doing the communicating in and out, and coordinating meetings, things like that. So for now, there's nothing to vote on, but we did want to bring this to you, let you know that this is upcoming, and we will be asking for a little bit of a nod at our meeting later this month before we release the RFP. So with that, I will offer time for any questions. Other than that, we can move on.
So,
Yeah.
So Johnson doesn't have any.
So they, at this point, Johnson doesn't touch it. Their network would just connect to the Jester Park. So they are more of a neighbor and advisor on it, similar to us and SERPTA. At this point, the MPO and SERPTA have no financial piece in this either. I will say it though, being that it is part of the Northwest Corridor and a portion of our planning area, we have asked that it be included, that we look at, you know, the whole corridor as well, and how traffic as a whole will get through there, not just the trail. So no, not for now. If they have money, getting kind of.
What's your free money?
Thank you.
Yep.
We have the funding use of media. Speaking of money, typically we are going through the process now of awarding federal funds to our SBE program. As you all recall, we just said we're going to take a pause. So no awards going out at this time, no process taking place at this time for the 2031 that we usually will. And just to recap, we're doing that because we just did the comprehensive safety action plan. We need to make sure we're catching up to that, catching up to the long-range plan, understanding what's happening in DC with federal companies and so forth. So that was why we did this pause. In lieu of that, though, we have this funding review committee that has been meeting for the last couple of months. And kind of going through three phases here. So the last several months have been a discovery phase. So we looked at what other MPOs do with their funding. We talked about some ideas that Zach has had. And we've kicked that around a little bit. So that's what we wanted to take a moment today. That group has met 3 times. We want to kind of catch you up with what they've been talking about. And then get a little input from you, and then that group will continue to go on. You can see who's on that committee there on the screen. So Glenn Murray from this group is on there. Mike Jones is also on there. He's here today. Supervisor McCoy will be on this group most likely here soon. So we've got 3 elected officials, 3 city managers, and 3 people from our technical committee. So the community development director, city engineer, and so forth. Like I said, they've met 3 times and really been trying to figure out where do we go from here, understanding the ideas, and try to sort of piece together some scenarios of what we can do
with the funding that we have. So if you go to the next slide there, we've heard a lot of different ideas. I won't go into all of those ideas there, but we've kind of separated them down to a scrap pile. So those are ideas we talked about. Decided probably not for us. And then the keeper pile. The keeper pile includes a few things we've seen from other regions and other things that just kind of make sense for us. So online scoring tool was one. So one of the pieces of feedback we heard was making our process more transparent. And we discovered that Denver, so the Denver MPO, uses an online scoring tool. So communities can just go in there and draw in their plan into a GIS map, and it will just automatically calculate your scores. So it's very, no one submit what your score is going to be. You can play around with a couple of projects, you can extend it, you can change it, you can refine it to make it the best project possible in terms of what the MPO for it. But then, submit it. So it's very transparent in that way. It's very real time feedback. Everyone really liked that idea. So that's something we'll proceed forward with. Again, we just completed the Vision Zero plan, the action plan. They need, longer relevant is what we've been hearing, what we've been talking about. There's a few ways to go about that. We can make more forward, or more of a score, more points available for safety, or have the threshold, or maybe say we're not anything unless it's safety. There's a few ways to go around, go with that. And the Vision Zero program, they're also the dedicated money for granted, and so forth, like another that fund. So that's the idea we're playing with. And then another one is this idea of a local swap. So if you recall a few years ago, there were MPOs were able to swap in the DOT. DOT would take the federal dollars, they would give the MPO to the local state dollars. For several reasons, we can't do that anymore. It's not allowed to. The DOT didn't have the capacity to continue to do that. But there's nothing to say that we couldn't do that on our own. And we have seen from other MPOs, Dallas, Texas MPO, the main one was others are working on it, where they facilitate that, where they will basically award communities to say, Will County, here's additional. Get an app for all this money, we're going to do a little bit more, and they turn around and give back local dollars. When they hold, the funds been swapped. So the MPO would end up with local dollars that then they could be out on the communities. And the burden falls on one or two communities to take on that big federal burden. The rest of them don't. So that's in a nutshell what that local swap looks like. We did survey, and we showed this to you last month, as we just talked about performance survey in general. But we did survey from our tech committee. We didn't get a lot of feedback. They responded. And you probably can't read that, but again, we talked about it last year. But safety was a really strong. Everyone felt very strongly about having safety be the foundation for what our funds are, be kind of a foundation of all of it. And then also the funding swap was also pretty well received in that. So there's a few other things there about making the application easier and so forth. But this is also helping guide us what we're doing. And we had a conversation with the tech committee earlier today. And got some too. I want to touch on that Vision Zero program real quick. We, as you probably are aware, we applied for that subsequent round of Safe Streets for All funding. We got money for the planning components of it, but we didn't get money for the implementation components. So our idea here is we can create our own implementation part for safety, roadway safety audits. So we would do the roadway safety audits with the funding we received from the feds, but then we would have a pot of funding to actually implement the recommendations. That's what that Vision Zero program is. There's a few different ways you can go around it. And we'll continue to play with that, but that's really what that is. One of the questions we had that we ran through that review committee, and we also asked the tech committee today, is what level of involvement should the MPO have in that program and in safety? So we could just keep it the way it is. It's kind of walking through this matrix here. The catalyst one is really just taking what we have now, got the funding, we can do the studies, we don't have money for implementation, we can just do that. Say we're getting started. Communities, if you're supportive of it, you can fund these projects on your own, or we can kind of go up and say, we'll continue to do all the roadway safety audits, but again, we'll be leaving the implementation to the communities, and then we can get into more where the MPO is actually funding the implementation. That's where the champion. It sounds like a little bit 10. But the leader in the champions component. It's really just the MPO would take on board that role, put a dedicated pot of money there for communities to apply to and implement their dollars. What the funding review committee, and I think the tech committee agreed that somewhere in that leader champion is probably the right way to be it, the right place to go. Like now that I'm thinking back on this, really the only difference between a leader and champion is what local component should be in there. And I think the committee felt like communities should still have a local skin in the game, have a local match to it, which we agree with. So it's really the only big difference there. If you want to keep going there, back to this local swap idea. So these things kind of build upon each other. If we have this pot of money that is for low cost safety countermeasures, the next question is, does it make sense for those to be federal funds that are going to this? Bringing federal funds changes what you have to do. Does it make sense to do that for a $50,000 implementation? Maybe not. So our thought is if we do set aside a pot of money, maybe this is where that local swap can come. With the local swap, there is flexibility. You don't have to meet a lot of federal requirements. You do projects on off-system roadways. Right now, our federal funds have to be spent on getting technical with federal functional highway plan, getting your federal functional classification, our field collectors. We can spend it on things off of that stuff if they were local. And potentially for dollars. However, to make that happen, you have to have this funding swap in place that has a lot of legal implications, a lot of fiscal oversight, responsibilities by the NPO, process. We have to have the staff to do that. So there are pros and cons. There are a lot of considerations we have to make. So our question to that committee and what we pose to you is, does this make sense to continue looking at? Right? If we want to, we will continue to explore this. If everyone's like, this is too complicated, then we're not going to time. And the committee felt like this was worth considering, and the tech committee also agreed that. Go to the next slide. There's a few ways we can go about this. But we could leave it the way it is. We could jump in and do this full blown project. We could kind of somewhere in the middle, study it more, maybe go pilot. These are some of the things that we're looking at. I will tell you that, like I said, Dallas, Texas is the one who's been doing this for 15 or 20 years and kind of got it figured out. But they're talking to other NGOs. They talk to us. Columbus, Ohio is another one that they've talked to. Columbus has actually hired PFM, which is you're probably familiar with. They developed a program for to have that kind of fiscal oversight by someone who's very involved with that world. To tell them, here's what you could or could not do with the funding and how it all flow and work and things like that. So that is something we can consider as well. There's just make sure so by giving this chance of funds or funds in a sense. So there's a few ways we can do this. There's one way that there's really no gain in funding. It just provides a little more flexibility where when we did an exercise and showed to the funding subcommittee that if we review committee just looking at 1 year of our funding and activity, that's where all the projects are program running. We were able to put pretty much all of the project, all the federal funding into one project. Polk County has just a big project. We can say we're going to swap all that money to Polk County. All right. They take on the federal burden, and then Polk County, if they have the mechanisms to shift local dollars to all the other projects. Now they don't have to go through the federal process. They still get the projects done. There's still the money there. So that's one way to do it. The other way to do it would be, as I kind of explained, maybe give more money to a project. So let's use Polk County as an example again. They got a $50 million project. They asked for $5 million in that 1 year. We say we're going to give you 10 instead and get us 5 back to local. And then the MPO awards that. But because the MPO is holding that now, if you continue to it's money and then you reimburse it, and then it grows the pot a little bit. There's things like that's how the money grow in addition to just being more fun. And again, that's something to doubt. They have a pot of fun sitting there. And I talked to the director the other day that turned over I don't know how many times in their 15 years past. It's done a lot. And then you can use that to leverage additional federal dollars because then you're not federal. Like there's a lot of potential there, but there's also a lot of work they have to set it up and set it up in a way that everyone's comfortable.
Maybe MPO is kind of established by state DOT. Does the swap have to provide state in terms of what particular contracting, right, any kind or avoiding the federal rules, but that's political subdivision that we have to.
Yeah, it would still have to comply. It would be no different than if people are doing their own project with their own about building money process, whatever they go through, but all of those.
There's some federal relocation systems though, that the state cascade, code cascades federal. So I'm aware of times. So I deal with the main placing it in our houses. And at the local level, you don't have to pay that relocation payment. So I may want to inquire whether or not being a political subdivision of the DOT, we have to apply the state rules, which essentially are federal rules. So yes, the federal reporting is much greater than the state reporting. You may like that, but you may want to dive into that.
Right. Yeah, this will all take a little more study.
And it was a nightmare. My recollection of what the DOT does is because the account statewide required from the local agencies to keep back and work through them.
Yeah, I think they do allow it still for the RPAs, the more rural and pure equivalent. They just don't.
I think it's worth exploring. I think there are a lot of opportunities, especially you mentioned the smaller, if we're going to fund some of these smaller State Streets for All projects or some of those things that I think that they agree why we should take on federal requirements for that. But additionally, if you're going to bring $5 million to a community and they requested 3.5 and then that 1.5 comes back, I think it just provides a lot of opportunity for the entire group to work together on some of that. So I think it's worth exploring.
I'm not over exploring because I'm starting to just feel like a shell. What you're saying is the locals may not be getting those grants because it's so small.
Right.
That makes sense. Yeah, a lot of communities will just not bother with
Even
funds because it's either too small amount of money, or if it's a small community, they just don't have the staff capacity to take on all that. That makes sense right now. And I'll say too, I think our position, recently, speaking for staff, is we wouldn't do this all the time. This would just be a toolbox that when it makes sense, or when there's a need, makes sense.
Okay. Ideally, the larger projects that you want to swap.
Right.
And not totally small because I bring a lot for staff.
Yeah, and so what we talked about with the tech committee today, maybe it's kind of a hybrid, the middle through there, where we do have a pilot. We find an opportunity between two communities that require 20 different communities all on one agreement with a couple communities working to see how it works. And at the same time, integrate it for the financial or organization like that.
Well, if they're already doing this work for Ohio, they should really give us the
and Columbus was very, I would say Columbus is a little further ahead of us, but they just are starting to work sense. So we're a couple months from now, we'll know more how their process is. And they're very willing to discuss, they're very gracious to their practice. So I think that kind of it in terms of the next step in this whole process. The funding review committee will meet prior to the policy committee here. At that time, staff is going to present a few different options, kind of like we've shown you here, but show a few options here in a couple different ways that all come together. We will also share the policy committee at that time too. So, then we'll go back, we'll keep working on dates, and every once in a while we'll have a touch base with tech policies there.
So aside from the swap, some of the other things you were still exploring.
Yes. So safety is the big one.
There should be like a safety score, and then it says what's in the scrap pile aligned funding cycle with LRTP.
Yes.
What does that mean?
So
Actually, it's
some MPOs, and one thing that we had talked about was every 5 years, the award. So not every year, every 5 years.
Okay.
And I would say, yeah, I will say one thing that is kind of, it's not really described by other people, probably because we haven't really got to it yet, is what is the schedule? So,
I know we talked about, do we do 2 years at once, do we do a year of that, so I wasn't sure if
yeah, so that is still to be determined. And
Okay.
that will really change what the content of that application and everything looks like. So whether we do that every 2 years or whether we start in August or December, some of those scheduling issues.
Okay, thank you.
Whether that needs to be jumped in, but I forgot anything this.
Yeah. That's sort of like some of the other components, like targets. We currently have targets for transit, bridge, capacity, et cetera. That, along with schedule, will come forward as part of the scenarios that we put in front of you. And we're not really anticipating any major changes. That's what you're. This is going to be a quick reminder that staff is in the process of developing our program and budget for the next fiscal year, starting July 1st. This is our time of year when we ask you if there are projects, priorities, or other things that deserve our attention that we should be focused on. So please, we had put this to the technical committee representative earlier today. We're going to keep putting this in front of you until we have a draft in April, and the final will be due in June. It will highlight that some of the things we do anticipate adding to the UPWP or the Brent Slough Transportation Plan, which Elton just highlighted for you. The Vision Zero Studies and Roadway Audit Program, which we've got seed funding with the FS4A just talked about now for our own funding program, and then further implementing the additional recommendations of the funding review committee. There's also an item that will cover other items that may come into play for UPWP related to a railroad abandonment that's active right now. And as Dylan likes to point out, this is also not just the MPO work products, but your own work products. So if your jurisdictions are working on transportation plans and studies, et cetera, please let us know about them. We'll incorporate in that because this document then helps communicate out to the public all of the different things that the region is working on to improve the transportation system.
Just for what I will have to check with other stuff. I'm not aware of it, but Marcus, it was like one of our transportation plan. I couldn't say this fall last year.
But you can let us know if our cities out there. Or it's okay. No, I'm just saying, we think that might go, we don't.
I mean, we got the tech committee now.
So, okay.
I'm sure. Yeah. I will say it is a struggle to get people clear IPO things in there, sometimes to DOT.
Move on to Wednesday update.
At the state level, we'll have a few bills to bring to your attention here. The first is House File 2148. This would eliminate the smart planning principles that are in Iowa code right now.
Starting right now.
We like in 1 minute. Yeah. Marcus Keenan, our senior planner, who's the president of APA Iowa, he's there. He's not here today because he is there advocating against that. Along with Madeline Storms, our newly elected chair of our technical committee, is also there speaking out against that. Also, bike safety bill related to non-vehicular personal transportation, think e-devices. Chief McCluskey from Waukee was here earlier with our technical committee, and that generated a discussion. I'm sure your individual jurisdictions have been involved in a lot of the conversation. We had really good conversation at the technical committee level. We're hearing that bill has been pulled based on some of the backlash to it. McCluskey reported today that had actually been pulled, so it's being actively monitored. I'll leave it at that unless you have any questions about it. Lastly, I'll just highlight property tax bills that I'm sure your jurisdictions are all tracking very closely. Anything else I'm going to touch on here? Shall I keep going? Right. Federal, the big thing we're tracking is reauthorization here. This development is underway. hope to have a markup bill early this year from the House side. Hoping to have a draft text from the Senate also early this year. Also expecting to have forecasts from the Highway Trust Fund out of the CBO sometime soon. Highlight a few priorities on reauthorization. We work with our national associations on identifying some of these priorities, including the National Association of Regional Councils, the Association of NPOs. And these are kind of not too surprising, but we'd like to have more funding for our planning funds. And in addition to that, have more flexibility to how we use them, potentially reduce local match or eliminate local match requirements. And then also the flexibility to be able to use those for project development as opposed to just NPO operations. Like you would like to see an increase in our formula funding, like our STBG dollars. Also to preserve and streamline the discretionary funding opportunities that are available to us, in particular SS4A and GO grant. Anything else you want to pause on there?
I'll elaborate on this a little bit. There's recognition that the bipartisan infrastructure bill, a whole bunch more money. There was a lot more programs, a lot more money out there. The more money side is great. The more programs side is being problematic because a lot of the programs look at it with one another. They're complicated. Communities don't always have the wherewithal to go about that. So the proposal from these groups that for policy conference with NARC had a chance to sit down with Sherry and some other folks, and it sounds like the direction did go. The consolidate goes into more of a formula program. So the MPO dollars the MPO gets could increase because it will encompass the money that was once treasury dollar into that program. That's the intent behind that. And if it is for the SDG growth, for making other formula dollars. So making more formula dollars available, making those dollars available to the local communities that through the MPO. That means they wouldn't have to apply to the federal government, but they apply to the MPO. At the same time, wanting to keep some of those very popular, like bill, like stations, for all, so you kind of have a two-pronged attack. You get your formula dollars, you rely on those big things you all know. And not having a whole bunch of programs, which have really key ones that people know how to work, be better not forever. It'll shape a lot. So that's kind of where that's at. To the schedule piece, one thing I heard was yes, markups coming hopefully in March. However, the Senate, the Environment and Public Works, that's one committee that works on it, but there's like 4 committees that work on it. So one works on it, different works on it. They haven't all committed to that schedule. Wow. The big one will come forward in the draft language I can develop and pass around now. They'll kind of determine whether they all do that timeline recognition for the midterm, but while they want to get it done, campaign on it, if it doesn't happen by a certain point, they're going to abandon it. Campaign won't be a good idea to get them. I kind of heard about it, but yeah, it will happen, and I've heard no way it can happen. So stay tuned. Somewhere in the middle. Depending on.
Okay, let's talk about the DC list. As I believe most of you know, the partnership has finalized its schedule for the DC trip. It will be held the first week of June. And so now's the time when we are soliciting projects from our member jurisdictions. And the caveat here is that they're actively seeking transportation funding at the federal level. In the past, it was just kind of a wish list. We try to be more intentional about going out with asks that are actionable. Before you is the DC list that was put together for 2025 that was shared with our congressional delegation. We treat that as a starting point for our DC list this year. We distributed this at our technical committee meeting earlier this morning, asked for markups and feedback. I'd welcome you to add anything else here as well. So I can take it on the floor here and now. If you want to mark up a sheet and hand it to me later or send an email or direct your staff, we're going to be asking for this. Put a deadline on it of March 27. I know some of these things are fluid. Sometimes we don't know what we're asking. We don't know we have a federal ask until April. We can be flexible and make sure that we have an accurate list of what all asks are out there with regards to DC. Real quick for reference, I made sure you each one had these at your tables. Any questions on DC list?
Thank you. Thanks, Dylan, off the nominations.
Thank you. We talked about this a little bit here, but the nominating committee was appointed that was, Peter Potter, Gatto, and Lucky Dart, and the late they board that they're on the community packet. The Port County Chair, Councilmember Kinney from West Moines Vice Chair, and one to remain as Secretary Treasurer. Their nominations can be before, but that's what the proposal in terms of process, to be voted on here, but at the meeting here, if you will also be, that would be the time. But it's, if there is not elected, whoever's elected is elected, and it's they would take over their responsibilities.
Are you
Questions?
waiting for it?
Got a minute to go.
Margaret's like,
Any questions for Dylan? All right, hearing done, we have some informational items that we're happy to discuss. People have questions about those. Right, here done. Well, any other non-action items interesting?
I have two for you. Yesterday, staff participated in a debrief on the SS Florida Partial Grant Award that we shared with you. We received word of that in late December. And what we learned a little bit about the competitiveness of the grant program. We were on the implementation grant side. You can see that there was 515 applications asking for a total of $4.2 billion, which is 4 times total value available. At the bottom, there's the last one. There are 15 grant applications that received partial funding that include our grant award. On the right is the table of our overall score. Overall, our application was a recommended, which is the second highest you can get. Highly recommended will require all those subcategories being in the high category. So we did fairly well. We got some constructive feedback on how we could improve the subsequent application. I'm going to ask you to recall that the application package that we put together had a few different solution packages in it. Solution package 1 was the big implementation side of the project, and that was not funded. So some of the key takeaways that we heard if we were to go after another round were, 1, you'd want to target application amounts of no more than $10 million. Sounds like the administration's been really intentional about 10 million here, 10 million there, 10 million there. So need to be intentional, even if it means breaking up your set of projects into multiple applications and then forming them more around thematically consistent projects that has getting really into the weeds here, but you're very limited real estate within the application itself to justify everything. So much so that sometimes it becomes hard to connect the dots for the review team to see that you actually are meeting those requirements. And so by thematically lumping them into multiple separate applications, you can do a better job of scoring anything you're about. We did hear that the administration is anticipating another round of SS4A being announced sometime soon, and that the NOFO would be similar to 2025. So we're in a very good position to move ahead with that if we so choose. Our next step is going to be staff will reach out to member jurisdictions who've had projects on this list here, and just to make sure there is still interest, and then to start sussing out what it might look like to reassemble those in a handful of packages that could be put forward as separate applications. That's what I have for an update on SS4A after that question. Okay, you'll be hearing from us again on this.
And we don't have an idea yet on timing of the next round, just possibly release this spring.
They were a little bit dodgy to commit on a time and even an if.
Okay.
But what we heard was the NOFA was drafted, being reviewed by staff at the DOT, anticipated spring. So I think it's pretty safe bet that we'll see something by June. Next up, I want to draw your attention to a development that had been rumored last year, but is now official. The Grimes line. Recall that we had talked about a proposal brought to us about a potential passenger rail pilot program. I think that was an effort to make a business case for this line before they went down this last road of last resort for them. And they're saying there's not a business case here. We're getting out. So Norfolk Southern on January 20th did file a proposed abandonment of that line to the Surface Transportation Board. Iowa Interstate filed jointly with them. They operate that line on lease agreement. And so they were saying they would abandon operations as well. Several jurisdictions probably received paper copies of this. If you have not received it and want to see a copy of it, we have a copy available to us. Can share that with you. This process does allow for public comment. Not saying that we have anything to add at this point, but want to start a conversation with you. One thing I'll highlight is the timeline is unknown at this point. I had a conversation earlier this week with the director of the rail office of Iowa DOT. Now, what we're hearing is that typically this can take several years, even 3 to 5 years for something like that to happen. However, we are hearing speculation that this one might move faster, and we're hearing these from sources who are pretty close to the process. And I think this is speculation, but you're probably aware that there's been merger talks between Union Pacific and Norfolk Southern. There's some speculation that separate process might be motivating this rail abandonment piece to move more quickly. All this is significant for us because there are some very obvious implications for us. This is a 12.2 mile corridor that may suddenly become available for transportation uses. I know there's at least one jurisdiction locally that has a project they're trying to move forward. If this right of way were to become available, it would represent what they're imagining around $10 million cost savings for that particular project. So today, in bringing this to you, we just want to start a conversation with you because this is a rather unique opportunity, and I think there's probably value in having regional discussion about if, when, what we should be trying to think about for this corridor in the future. I'll stop talking and let you react.
Actually, if Railroad's gonna do it, they're gonna do it, right?
Correct.
No, not rail. They're not rail banking it, completely banning it.
I don't know definitively. My understanding is it's abandonment.
Is it viable for bike trail? Is that the thing?
Most rail abandonments in the state of Iowa end up as trails, according to the rail office. That is the likely scenario. And there would, especially from Windsor Heights Northwest, there's a lot of value in trail gaps that can be filled. That's less true into here.
And my understanding, maybe Andy told you something different when you talked to her the other day, but when this was first kind of started to be rumored last year, what I was made aware of is that if there was a rail to trail proposal that helps with the abandonment process, it could speed along. They know there's nothing to sit behind for this. So that's something we need to explore a little bit. Gotta mention the UWP, this might be one of those elements we have to put in there to do some additional work on. That might be one of those things.
Staff will be making more phone calls and understanding what interest is out there. I know INHF has somebody who's very active in rail trails, understanding if they're IMF, what they're doing. So we'll continue to do discovery on this. This is not the last time you're going to hear from us about this.
Just another question, because I can't read that map from here. That's from Grimes to where is the other star?
Yeah, so people in the neighborhood that might do that. They go behind Central Campus. Does it go behind Central Campus? Yes, I go.
It kind of comes down and meets with the main line and parallels it.
Yeah, the application includes a breakout that's a little more specific, but it was really poor image quality, but here. So this is an evolving situation. We're watching it. We'll continue to bring things to you.
I will make two comments here. One, we had our first pancakes and partners eat pancakes, we called it, this morning, and several of you were there, so thank you for coming. At 7:17, which normally we've done orientation.
Yes, you got it. It's food.
That was great. A lot of jokes. We've had breakfast and lunch already, so we're waiting for dinner. So I just want to appreciate you guys attending and we're able to make it. Hopefully you found it valuable. I really want to thank our staff who had very little to do with it. They did the work. So thank you to them. And if that's, people think that we'll continue to do this in the future. Trying to get back to our government and our strategic planning, trying to do a little everybody can make a little fun or find opportunities to socialize a little bit more, know each other, or the staff, or the board, etc. So I thought that was good. The other thing, I always got one more meeting, in policy committee, just one thing, or chair, the executive committee, and they, for the last 2 years, I guess, I kind of came in together.
Yeah, I can give the preview of my comment for the next meeting, but yeah, in the last 2 years, visioning, we updated, we made it less computational, I think, and more of a collaborative approach. I recall, yeah. Never seen anything like that before in my life.
I hope to never see this.
But yeah, we went through a lot of change last year, so hopefully, it feels a better place than where it was and continues to grow. And exactly what Patty breakfast this morning is that vision that for the socialization. People know that there's humans on this committee and you all work together. All right, our final, our church energy culture.
We got a copy of that slide there. Yes, you want to know what we showed today? Or? Yeah. We've got video slides from